Scot Wright from DraftCountdown.com. Joins us here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. 1 week away, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, and you're right. It's very much a hard deadline. The draft is coming whether I'm ready or not a week from now.
7 days, 4 hours, 56 minutes for you. And get yourself ready at DraftCountdown.com. All right, let's dive into some opportunities and possibilities at number 14 as we start this conversation off, Scott, because we got the poll question up today at 973 ESPN on Twitter. We ask, is it best for the Eagles to move up, move down, take best available player, or take the best cornerback available? Right now, Howie Roseman, Joe Douglas, what is the best blueprint for them with where they sit at number 14?
Yeah, and that's a $64,000 question. And where they are at number 14, it's probably going to be on the back end of the top-tier cornerbacks. Marshawn Lattimore from Ohio State is going to be gone. I think Garyon Conley from Ohio State is going to be gone. Sidney Jones from Washington's now out of the picture because of that injury. But Marlon Humphrey from Alabama could be there, and I'm a big fan of his. I actually have him as my top-graded corner. I just think he has everything you're looking for, and I just think the Eagles have such a dramatic need at cornerback. So I think that would make a lot of sense, although that's one of the strongest positions in this draft. They could get a starting caliber corner in the second round or even the third round, but if I were them, if one of those top-tier cover guys are on the board, I think they should take advantage of that.
Okay, let's look at that a little deeper because, by the way, the listeners out there who have been voting all throughout today's show on that very question, you look at what they do, 75% think the Eagles should take the best available player. So let's throw that out at you. If you talk about the depth at corner, and we all believe that corner is the area they need the most help, is there a prospect at another position that is just too good to pass on at 14 if they're there and say, you know what, take that guy, you can get your corner in round 2, maybe even round 3 and 4?
Yeah, and of course, we have to see who's there. If somebody unexpectedly falls, we just don't know that. But one player I personally would put in that category is a Mike Williams from Clemson. I just think he's kind of in a tier of his own as a receiver personally, but I think more for the Eagles' perspective, John Ross, the wide receiver from Washington, he would bring a different dimension to that passing attack. He'd be a perfect complement to what they have now. And let's face it, there's no one else like him in this draft. There's no one else that runs a 4.22, and there hasn't been anybody that fast since Chris Johnson, practically a decade ago now or whatever it was. So I think he would be the interesting one just because you're not going to be able to get John Ross later on. And I'm not even sure he's going to be available at number 14 overall, but that would be kind of an intriguing wild card for me.
So if it's Ross and Humphrey both there, do you go Ross and say, I'll take a corner in round 2? Or is Humphrey, who you just said, I think I heard you correctly say, he's your number 1 corner in this particular draft. Is he too good to pass up for you?
Yeah, I would steer clear of John Ross. He scares me personally as an evaluator just because of the durability factor. He's already had a couple of major lower leg injuries in his college career. He's currently rehabbing from another major surgery. I believe it's a shoulder or something, upper body. So that scares me because he's already got a pretty thin and narrow frame. And as fast as he is, it doesn't do you much good if you're not on the field. So I'd be a little skeptical there, and I'd go with my top-rated corner, Marlon Humphrey, who has everything you look for. He reminds me a little bit of Vontae Davis coming out of college, where he's almost built like a running back. He's got an ideal frame. He's a terrific athlete. His dad played in the NFL. He's got pro bloodlines. And the one thing that everybody knocks Marlon Humphrey on, at least all his detractors, is that he doesn't have great ball skills. He doesn't have great instincts in coverage. He doesn't get his head around. But at the end of the day, in his 2 years as a starter, 13 pass breakups with 5 interceptions. So if that's a weakness, that's still pretty good. So I really like Marlon Humphrey, and I can see why some would make a case for Lattimore or Conley as their top corner, but I think Humphrey absolutely belongs in that top tier.
Scot Wright, DraftCountdown.com. How many corners do you think will go in the first round?
Yeah, that's interesting because you wonder if teams might recognize the depth and shy away and wait to take advantage of that depth and address another need in the first round. But all the guys I already talked about, Humphrey, Lattimore, Conley, are going in the first round. I think Tre'Davious White from LSU is going to go in the first round. And after that, that's where it kind of gets questionable. Then I think you have a bunch of guys on the fringe, Adoree Jackson from USC, Chidobe Awuzie from Colorado. And keep in mind, this is without this is without the aforementioned Sidney Jones, who's injured. Fabian Moreau from UCLA would have probably been a late-round pick, but he got injured. It's going to drop him a little bit. Kevin King from Washington is going to be in that late first-round mix as a corner. So I think the interesting number is how many corners do we see in the top couple of rounds, because teams might wait to take advantage, but ultimately, when all is said and done, the corners that come off the board in the top 2-3 rounds, I think we could be approaching record numbers, and you're basically going to be getting a first-round corner in the second round, a second-round corner in the third round.
Yeah, you answered a little bit of it there, Scott. That's what I wanted to ask you about. When you do talk corner, how deep into the draft do you think you can find those starting caliber guys? Because I've heard Mike say on this show many times he wants the Eagles to go corner in round 2, 3, and 4. Could that net 3 starting caliber guys?
At least a couple, I think. I think you're going to be able to get legitimate starting caliber guys in the second and third round. And in the fourth, it might start getting a little sketchy, but even there, you're going to get guys who are going to come in and play for you and contribute and at the worst be solid backups. So it really is incredible depth. And I think the Eagles are in one of those situations where they could justify what's called flooding in the NFL draft world, where you just bring in multiple players at the same position. We saw a couple years ago the Packers did it. Their first 2 picks were defensive backs. Last year, the Carolina Panthers, I think, took 3 defensive backs in rounds 2, 3, 4, something like that. So I think the Eagles are in such a state at cornerback that they could very easily justify grabbing a couple of these guys and really shoring up that position for the foreseeable future.
Similar to what they did to kick off the Andy Reid era with Sheldon Brown, Lito Shepherd, Michael Lewis. They just, boom, boom, boom.
There you go.
They filled that secondary up and had about an 8-year run with those guys.
Absolutely. In hindsight, that was a good move, too. I like that, bringing back some names from the past.
Scot Wright, draftcountdown.com. And, yes, Pete and Scott, I have said kind of go corner, because at 14, I think, in your opinion, Scott, you mentioned flooding. Do you see a situation where there's going to be some top 10 talent dropping because of teams trying to get quarterbacks in that top 10 that would move some guys to the 14th spot that maybe are top 10 talent? Do you see a good possibility of that, giving the Eagles a much tougher choice to make between a best available player and a best corner?
Well, yeah, it's possible. And it's always the $64,000 question is always the quarterback. It's like when you're putting together a puzzle, the quarterbacks are the edges. Once you get that filled in, you can kind of figure out the rest, but it's figuring out where to put those quarterbacks. And there's a lot of chatter, especially right now. This is silly season. Teams are out there chumming the waters, trying to elicit trade offers and see what action is out there. But when push comes to shove, I don't think we're going to see a quarterback in the top 10 unless maybe the Cleveland Browns trade up a little bit from number 12. But I think the Browns are the most likely team in round 1 to take a quarterback, and I think Mitchell Trubisky from North Carolina is the apple of their eye. And then I don't know that there is another place in round 1 for a quarterback the way the draft order sits now. I do think we're going to see action late in the first round with teams trading up to get the signal call of their choice. But if I were putting the over-under on the number of quarterbacks in round 1, I think it's going to be 2.5. But from the Eagles' perspective, it would obviously be a huge positive if that run started really early. If the 49ers took one at 2 and then the Jets took one and maybe the Bills, or if 2 of those 3 quarterbacks came off the board, that could absolutely push down maybe one of those top 2 cornerbacks. Maybe it pushes Gary and Conley or Marshawn Lattimore to them or someone else. So that would definitely behoove, if you're an Eagles fan, you're rooting for those quarterbacks to come off the board early and often.
Scott, how about running back? Give us your take on McCaffrey, because we've heard a lot of praise about him. Is 14 too high? Or if he's there, do the Eagles have a tough choice to make if McCaffrey is there at 14?
If he's there, I think he'd be under consideration at 14 because not only would he address some issues in the backfield, but also he's essentially a wide receiver as well. He gets compared to Marshall Faulk, Reggie Bush, guys like that. So, and then also an outstanding return ability as well. So The problem is, I don't even think McCaffrey's going to make it that far. If I were doing my final mock draft right now, I'd have him going number 8 overall to the Carolina Panthers, and he's definitely going to be a top 20 pick, and I think the second running back off the board. I have some concerns with McCaffrey simply because I think you can get players with maybe not such a high level of talent, but a similar skill set in the middle rounds, and I just get really concerned when I hear about prospects that teams have to. We have to figure out ways to get him the ball. We're going to get creative. We're going to do this because they never do. It seems like they never maximize the talent of weapons like that. So, but Christian McCaffrey right now is a very hot name. A lot of teams really like him, and honestly, I don't even think the Eagles are going to have a choice. But if he's there, I think they're going to take a long, hard look at him. But if I were them, I'd shy away. I think you could get a similar player 3-4 rounds later.
We'll go from a hot name to a controversial name. That's Joe Mixon. What are your thoughts on him? Because there's lots of reports of teams pulling him off the board. Is Joe Mixon a first-rounder?
Well, and if not for the ugly off-the-field incident, he'd be the second running back in this draft and a top 12 to 15 overall pick. And arguably an even more well-rounded player than Leonard Fournette when it comes to running, catching the ball, blocking. But the off-the-field incident is that huge X factor. And ultimately, when push comes to shove, I think he's going to go on day 2. I think he's going to be a second or third round pick. And I've just been following the draft long enough to know that the more talented you are, the more lenient teams will be. And Joe Mixon's really talented. And he will be off some boards. Some teams won't be considering him at all, but he'll be on enough that somebody's going to take a flyer. I think keep an eye on the Cincinnati Bengals in round 2. They're a team that has never shied away from guys with character concerns. Maybe the Minnesota Vikings could be a fit, but I think he'll be a day 2 pick, but not round 1. The public relations hit would just be too difficult to bear to take Joe Mixon in round 1, I think, for even any organization.
Hey, Scott, when you look at the Eagles board and look at what they did in free agency, Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Smith, do you think that kind of pulls them out of wide receiver at 14?
I think probably does, with the possible exception of John Ross, who I talked about earlier, just because I think he'd bring something so unique to that core and complement everyone that they currently have. But by and large, I don't think they're going to take a wideout at 14. But they could have a couple of pretty intriguing options, and not only Ross, but as I said, Mike Williams, who I think is a Des Bryant clone. He's a big, physical, true number 1 go-to target. So I guess it really depends on what type of future they see for Alshon Jeffrey. Do they think he's going to be in their long-term plans, or is he going to be a 1-year rental? Because if it's the latter, they should absolutely still be in the market for a receiver at 14. But I have a feeling they're kind of going forward as if he's going to be a part of the big picture.
A lot of Eagles fans think that 14, that they're in a good spot, but with the corner need, and as we've kind of chronicled here, there's a lot of depth there, that moving back and getting themselves multiple picks, maybe in that second round would be a good move. Do you think that's something that Howie Roseman should look into? Maybe that 14 is something that they don't even really need to be at in this position, that get yourself down and add some more picks to their, repertoire. Is that something that you think would give you'd give them high grades on?
Yeah, and I think one thing that draftniks like myself and the people who actually run NFL teams very much have in common is we all like extra picks. If we are in charge, we all want as many picks as possible. We want as many bites at the apple as possible. But I think the answer to that question really comes down to where do they feel is their drop-off, especially if they're looking at, for example, a cornerback. I personally have 3 cornerbacks in that top tier that we've talked about. Maybe they only have 1 or 2. Maybe they have 4. So I just think it depends on the compensation coming back, whether that justifies giving up the player that they get at 14. So I think it's very dependent on their own evaluations. But if it were me personally, would I move out of that top tier corners for an extra second or a third round pick? I'd probably consider it, but I think there's a clear drop off after that top 3. So I'd be more inclined to stay there and address that need, one of the top tiers of talents at that position in this draft. But maybe they only have 1 or 2 corners in that top tier. So we really can't answer that until we're in their war room.
Scott, here's something we haven't talked about, defensive end. Number 1, do you think that's a legit possibility? And number 2, which guy do you like at that spot? There's been a lot of buzz around the edge rusher around this team.
Yeah, this is actually a stronger than average crop of pass rushers. There's kind of abnormal depth. I think you can be able to get a really good pass rusher well into the second, maybe even into the third round, which you don't usually find because even if there's a lot of them, they come off the board quick because everybody's looking for them. So even though it's not the Eagles' most dire need, I think they could certainly look at it, and they're right at the spot there in the middle of the first round where they could kind of start the run on the second tier. Of course, Myles Garrett from Texas A&M is going to be the number 1 overall pick. Then I think Solomon Thomas from Stanford is going to be a top 10 overall pick as well. But there's a lot of options there in the middle of the first round. Derek Barnett from Tennessee, Paris McKinley from UCLA, Taco Charlton from Michigan, Charles Harris from Missouri, and all bring a little something different to the table too. It's kind of a what flavor are you looking for? What type of player do you want to add? So if the Eagles want a pass rusher, they're going to be pretty well positioned there at 14 to go that route. Ultimately, I don't think they will, but it's one of those things. I try never to fault teams for the decisions they make at quarterback in the draft because I just appreciate them trying rather than going out and signing some 35-year-old journeyman. It's kind of the same thing with the pass rusher. It's hard to ever criticize a team for drafting a pass rusher.
Where would you say the cutoff is in terms of talent on the pass rushers?
Like I said, I think it's firmly through a couple of rounds this year. And then after that, it might get sketchy. And where the Eagles are in round 3, I probably wouldn't want to wait too much longer than round 3. But round 2 or round 3, if that's one of their priorities, I think that's going to be the sweet spot for getting value.
You see, you mentioned Harris. Charles Harris is a guy whose name keeps coming up around here, the Missouri kid. How many of these guys do you see as first rounders? I mean, you have Harris ranked on your board at draftcountdown.com as the number 6 guy. If he's there at 14, is that too high for him? Because I keep hearing his name a lot around the NovaCare Center.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're all kind of lumped together. He's my number 6 defensive end, and I think I have him as my number 33 player overall. But I think he's going to go even earlier than that. I think he's going to very much be in somewhere in that middle of the first round range, and a really good player. And of course, Missouri has a very good track record when it comes to producing NFL defensive linemen in recent years, and he had a terrific sophomore season, got off to a little bit of a slow start as a junior. It was a new coaching staff, a new scheme, but once he adjusted, he really came on down the stretch, and not necessarily a standout physically. He doesn't have the prototypical length or necessarily athleticism. Very above average in both regards, more than adequate, but not spectacular, but gets it done more with nuance. He's a good technician. He's got a wide array of pass rush moves. So I think the sum is great. The total is greater than the sum of the parts, or whatever the saying is there. I'm screwing it up, but on paper, he's a better player than he looks like on paper with the physical tools. So he's kind of a similar situation with Derek Barnett from Tennessee, where a terrific college player, teams just wonder if the physical tools will play up with Barnett, and a very polarizing prospect. And I could see him going anywhere from the top 10 overall or falling all the way to the end of round 1.
Hey, Scott, would Reuben Foster of Alabama, the inside linebacker, be fit for the Eagles at number 14? His name's popped up in recent days, but I'm not sure if that's a great fit there.
Yeah, I'm not sure that position is going to be a priority, and that's the range I think we're going to be looking at for Reuben Foster. And a lot of people feel he's one of the 10 best football players in the draft. And based on the film alone, I think I'd probably have a hard time disagreeing with that. But I think he's in danger of sliding a little bit on draft day for a few reasons. First of all, his positional value. He's a off-the-ball linebacker who doesn't really rush the passer. So those types of guys tend to slide a little bit. And there are exceptions, whether it be Patrick Willis or Luke Kuechly, but by and large, that isn't a position teams prioritize early in round 1. Secondly, he's got some character concerns. Of course, much is made about he got sent home from the scouting combine, and there's a few other things teams were concerned about. And the third thing is health. He's still not totally healthy. He's recovering from a shoulder issue. So don't be surprised if Reuben Foster is that one big name that everyone's expecting to come off the board in the top 10. I think he could slide towards the end of the round 1, really.
How about O.J. Howard? If he's on the board at 14, do the Eagles have to strongly consider him?
I think they should, and I think he'll be off the board by that point. And I'm really stingy with my elite grade. I'm only giving it to – there's been years I've only given it to one player. This year, 3 guys got it, and O.J. Howard was one of them. He's the best all-around tight end prospect I've seen since I've been covering the draft. Just checks every single box, and I think his best football is still ahead of him. So I think he could go as early as the top 5 overall.
Wow.
I think that's going to be his range. He could go 4 to the Jaguars, 5 to the Titans, 6 to the Jets, 8 to the Panthers, and with both O.J. Howard and I think Leonard Fournette from LSU, they're both such special talents at their respective positions that they could very well end up with a team that doesn't have an obvious need at their position simply because they're just too good to pass up. Similar to a few years ago where the Jets wound up taking Leonard Williams at number 6 when the last thing they needed was a defensive lineman.
Scot Wright, draftcountdown.com. Couple quick hitters for you here. Would you trade up to get Mitchell Trubisky?
No, I definitely won't, and I'm leery of Mitchell Trubisky. I have a similar grade on him as I did to Blake Bortles when he was coming out of college, a late first, early second round grade, and I actually like Bortles a little better than I like Trubisky. That 1 year of starting experience concerns me, and for me, my draft board, I have Deshaun Kaiser 1 as a late first round pick, who's probably at least a year away. I kind of put him in the same category as Paxton Lynch from a year ago. Top 10 potential, but he's a year away. Then after that, I have a drop-off to that next tier with Trubisky, Deshaun Watson from Clemson, Patrick Mahomes from Texas Tech, and even Davis Webb from California. So if I were looking for a quarterback in this draft, I'd be waiting to the top of round 2 and hoping to get Kaiser. And even if he's gone, there's going to be 2 or 3 other guys with similar grades. And I really compare this quarterback class to 2014 when you had Bortles, Johnny Manziel, Teddy Bridgewater, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, Tom Savage, A.J. McCarron. You had all of these options with legitimate starting potential, but they all had potentially fatal flaws as well. So you didn't have much of a consensus. And I see a similar thing happening this year, and you might be able to get the best quarterback in this draft in the second round.
Scott, when do you take Fournette?
Boy, well, I mean, if I were running a team, I wouldn't take him in the first round just because philosophically I wouldn't take any running back in the first round. But if there's ever a running back to do it for, it would be him. He's my number 2 overall player in this entire draft, grade-wise. He is a freak of nature. He's one of those 3 guys who got my elite grade along with Myles Garrett and O.J. Howard. And the scary thing is I think he's going to be an even better pro than college player. He is as close to Adrian Peterson as you're going to find.
Scot Wright, the president of draftcountdown.com here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Check out draftcountdown.com for more on your favorite players, sleepers, small school guys. Scott does it all. We'll be talking to Scott next week to get you ready for draft day, and we'll recap it all after it's all over. Scot Wright, draftcountdown.com here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. All right, Scott, you got 7 days, 4 hours, and change to get ready, pal.
I'll be ready.